Hello, so it's the middle of double game week 36, the big one, the one we all look forward to, and halfway through, yeah, it's been mixed fortunes to say the least, all of which makes me glad to some extent. This is the antepenultimate pod of the series, so the one before the one before last. As I really want the season to come to its end fairly soon, but obviously not my time podding with Harry, who I'm joined by today. Free to go, Harry, free to go. You're right.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Feels like a week that we've all planned for, and it feels like it started as well as we would ever expect a big double game week to start with blanks all around our teams. But we will talk about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about going into game week 37 of who are going to be the players that we're all going to pick. They're going to give us blanks all around in just a minute. Thank you all for joining again. We are Who Got the Assist. You can find Tom at WGTA_FPL. You can find myself at FPL_Harry. Almost got my own at wrong there. I read it enough times now. I should finally know it, even after a recent change. Today, we're going to have a look at a tactical approach to game week 37. We'll have a look at the doubles, the single game weeks as well, how we should maybe balance our squads between the two, the usual bits of a mid-game week update. So we're recording on Monday evening before any matches for the second half of the double game week take place. We'll do the mini league update, the market forces, and then potentially a little bit look at potential pricing into next season while we go through as well.
Cool. Yeah, as mentioned, we're just going to push through, and as the last few pods have been, just have those discrete sections, just get the hour pushed all the way through. As Harry mentioned, it's Monday night, so we're pretty much it's not obviously not the exact halfway point of the double game week, but it's the halfway point for our teams in terms of how that's all shaken out. It's a good place to start as well, which is the game week updates. So I think one thing to note is that the most nervous time I find of any, like, when the game has locked and it's about to update, is when you've hit bench boost. Like, I've checked like the FPL website on my computer, I checked on my phone, I checked on my tablet, checked on an app as well, just make sure it had gone through. I mean, there's something about it where you're kind of just half expecting that it's all going to go wrong, and especially as well because I put like Kane, Trent, and Robertson on my bench. It would have been a bit horrible for it to have been a bit of a Heisenberg, wouldn't it? So
Yeah, pull a Heisenberg.
yeah, that would have been awful. But yeah, like, lucky it did go through. So I had two decisions this week that I was deciding between, and I actually posted that I was going to commit to the first one, which was to just do Woods to Richarlison. Well, I'd already done that by the time we were podding last week with Finesse, actually, so I could just say, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. I'd already done that, and I was thinking, oh, I'm just going to captain Cancelo, not do another move here, and basically just go with it. No hit taken, no bench boost, and just roll with this week. So I don't think it's very good. The other thing I could have done, which is what I did do, take the -8 and just get the bench boost done. And that involved removing some deadwood. So Breuer, Ramsey, who sadly was injured at the last minute. I brought him in last week thinking, oh yeah, he's a great bench boost asset for this week. So he's got Norwich and he's got double and he's got another double. So perfectly we've done. I have to take him out for Gordon. So that's on top of the Wood to Richarlison move. So a -8 I would have taken, which I did do in the end. I got rid of Ramsey for Gordon. He's blanked time being. Luckily, Richarlison has got some points in terms of an assist. And I removed Breuer for João Pedro. The reason I did that was because it means that I can afford, if I so wish, Bukayo Saka to Wilfried Zaha this week, if I so wish to do so. That was the reason why I did that. Unfortunately, it turned out, just as Watford's lineup was announced, that João Pedro is out with a groin strain and may indeed miss the second game as well. So I could have just given away 4 points for absolutely nothing, which is an absolute pain in the arse. So I'm sat with 54 points, -8 halfway through this game week. I'd say my actual bench has got 7 points. Like, obviously, I've shithoused it. I'm well aware of that. But my actual bench of Foster, Davis, Gordon, and João Pedro have got 7 points between them. It's looking a little bit like it might be a bit of a crap one, but we'll see. We'll see. In terms of returnees, the returnees have been Richarlison, Martinelli with assists, Cancelo with his assist. Oh, could have captained him and got that. And Laporte with a goal too, which is quite nice. I had Laporte for ages, had that double up for ages. It was nice to see both of them get attack and returns. So yeah, 54 points, -8, which takes me to 46 net. A small, modest green arrow at this halfway point, hoping for better from the second round of 15 games. What about you, Harry? How have you been getting on?
Oh, it's not going well. And it actually happened to me when I spent so long like focusing on particular game weeks in the season. I did it for game week 27. I did it for game week 30 with that sort of blank. And then I've done it for this sort of bench boost. So I feel like I've planned for it for so long. And all three of them have been like really anticlimactic. And it's actually the weeks around them that I've done so much better than these actual game weeks that I've spent months and months planning for. I am also on my bench boost, 46 points from 15 people starting. That is an average. Yeah, that's an average of 3 points per player. At least you did 54 with a -8. Like my team have averaged 3 points from a player. My bench is on 10. Foster 4, Pookie, Dennis, Gordon. I had a choice of transfers going into this week. I had 3 options basically. Option 1 was to buy Diaz and Mahrez, which Diaz looks like he's out he is out for the season, we've heard. Mahrez didn't play, so I'm quite glad I didn't do that. I brought in Kulusevski and Richarlison for João Pedro and Havertz, both of which didn't start, so things were looking great. However, it turns out the other option that I had when I wrote it down on paper was to bring in Foden and Nketiah, which would have been quite the transfer. There's about a 15, 20 point swing there, but yeah. I've had enough luck over the past couple of weeks to make it slightly less painful. But yeah, 46 points. The only returns I've got are Son, which is massively owned, and Cancelo with his 9, and then Richarlison's 5, and then Foster's couple of save points as well, hoping for a bit more to go because I'm on a very small red arrow despite being on my bench boost this week.
Yeah, no one wants the red arrow from the bench boost. So I feel your pain like so much, even though, yeah, you've gotten had a few good weeks. I still think, getting the 50-50, like one side is absolutely a god tier move and the other side hasn't quite come to fruition yet. Just seeing what could have been, what you could have won. I can still feel why that's really harrowing and really annoying. Like I feel at some extent with like obviously taking a big hit and captaining Cancelo versus the outcome that we've got. But no, that's very frustrating. But as you said, hopefully it will ameliorate itself, self-right itself as we come into the second half of the game week. Righto, let's move on to the mid-league update at this kind of halfway point. Top still is Hakan Mangashnez. He's managed to keep his spot at the top at 49 points for him this week. He captained Salah. I think basically everyone kind of did. Maybe a couple of De Bruyne's in there, but he captained Salah, 49 points for him. It didn't take a hit though, which is quite good. He brought in De Bruyne actually this week. In second, Ryan Mackey, just 29 points for Ryan. Oof. At the halfway point this week. In third, it is the brothers Grimsby, Chris Turner. I was actually on a stream with Chris just before the deadline. And I think when I was on that stream, and I was obviously talking to Chris about what I was going to do and yada, yada, yada. And I kind of was on FPL review and it kind of narrowly put bench boosting ahead. I think that's kind of what swung me to make the decision when I was kind of live on air, as it were. So basically, I blame Chris Turner of at Net That Hall for everything that happens this week. He himself took -8. He's on 46 at the moment. And -8 involved bringing in Nketiah, which is good, but also involved bringing in Mahrez for Mount. So Mahrez didn't start the game against Newcastle. 46 -8 for him. He stays in third. In fourth, Artenista, Joachim Lengroff, up to fourth from fifth. 46 points for him. De Bruyne captain for Joachim. That pushes Troy Hope, Lucky Prophet, down to fifth from fourth at 47 -4 for Troy. In sixth, from 8th, 51 points for Brett Taylor. I love Lamptey. Another De Bruyne captain there. In seventh, 3 hits played by James Coe. Salah captain for him, but only 38 points. He and Oisin Kerwan, the special one, go down. Oisin went down from 7th to 8th, 35 -4 for him. In 9th, up from 13th, it's Brian Ndongmo, Miche Van Antonio, 51 points for him. He brought in Pickford this week, which is quite an inspired transfer. In fact, there's quite a few players. There's 4 managers all locked in place in 9th. There's Brian, there's Steve Jones, it is what it is, Sheikh Mustafa Danish, and Nod to the Smith, and Arnaud Tillion, who are all locked together in 9th. Scores ranging from between 63 for Mustafa and 35 for Steve Jones. So yeah, quite a few players, quite a congested kind of top 10, but obviously a lot to go in terms of this week. It's nowhere near over yet, as the Claxons once sung. Right, next up, Eddie Nketiah time in the transfer market, isn't it?
It is indeed. Number one transferred in ahead of game week 37 is Nketiah 5.6 million. He is now 41,000 transfers in at time of recording on Monday evening. Newcastle away this week, followed by Everton at home. It's a great couple of fixtures. No double this week, but given his price and given the way he has returned since he's found his way into that Arsenal lineup, you can understand, especially as an enabler if people are trying to free up money to go elsewhere, but also just as a sort of standout forward option that we seem to have at the moment. There are a few of them in the top sort of 10. We've got Watkins and we've got Richarlison coming in, the sort of three forwards that people are really trying to pick at the moment. Elsewhere in the sort of top 5, we've got Zaha with a double coming in second. Son, people still trying to get on him with Burnley and Norwich in the final 2. Watkins, as we mentioned, with a good double in game week 27. And then Luis Diaz, 8 million still, seems to be finding whenever he gets the ball, or wherever he gets a start in that Liverpool team, he's finding the back of the net. Really good form from him. I'm still concerned about his minutes, but Nketiah, Zaha, Son, Watkins, particularly the top 4, are very understandable why people are going and buying them, I think.
Yeah, lots of exciting transfers, aren't they? Those guys. You're not seeing kind of boring defenders and goalkeepers being brought in. No, it's the attacking players, the players who can get you those explosive returns and being sold. The likes of Mason Mount for Zaha and Son, I suppose, to some extent, Jota and Ramsey in the midfield slots. And up front, Emmanuel Dennis, probably people kind of done with him. They've seen enough. They've seen enough of Watford. Believe me, I think we've all seen enough of Watford. Apologies, Watford fans, but I think you probably agree with us, to be fair. You don't seem like a terrible bunch, unlike some other fan bases I know. And Ronaldo being sold too. But, I mean, there's not that many transfers that have been made thus far, which kind of makes sense, reflecting that we are still halfway through double game week 36. But we're here to kind of talk about game week 37. So I think we should probably move on to that while we're here. And I think we should get there through a good question from Amrabat FPL, who, well, actually, is it Amrabat FPL? Amrabat Man FPL, apologies, Joe. Because there are kind of, I guess, two main, I mean, I did say I was going to be looking at bench boosting this week, but I suppose there's kind of two main sort of channels that people are going down this week. One is free hitters and the other is non-free hitters. And I'm a non-free hitter, and Harry, you are free hitting, of course. And Joe, Amrabat Man FPL, asks, which premiums would you prioritize in a free hit this week? And I think probably it's worth just kind of having this discussion as kind of the way into talking about this double game week in particular, because it is a bit of a dodgy one to some extent. I mean, Everton, ex-motivation, potentially Brentford and Crystal Palace, they're double both at home, which could be quite alluring. In contrast, Burnley, the relegation sort of rivals, dead and buried, maybe. Spurs and Aston Villa, their away games. And two teams who are kind of, have nothing really to play for, also double. Villa, they're back to winning ways after beating Burnley this week. Crystal Palace and Burnley again, both at Villa Park. And Crystal Palace, Paddy V's revolution continues. Aston Villa, Everton away. Let's think about kind of doubles versus singles, though, and how it all sort of works out, because those are the single game week players, like Salah, like Kane. Salah's got Southampton, or Liverpool got Southampton, I should say. Spurs have got Burnley, and Man City got West Ham. They've got fairly decent fixtures, Harry. So I mean, you're on free hit. I think it's probably just worth sharing where you are at the moment and kind of what your thoughts are ahead of this double game week in terms of, I guess maybe let's look at singlers versus doublers first.
Yeah, so it's one of those ones, again, we seem to have it that we have a great couple of fixtures for single game week teams with players that we trust. And then we have double game week unproven assets who we maybe don't want to go and buy. And we've seen it countless times this season. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes more often than not, it hasn't worked going for the doublers. And I look at my team for this week and think, I cannot believe that I am playing a free hit when my team is lining up as it does this week. I've got triple Liverpool, including double defense away to Southampton. I've got James, I've got Alonso, I've got double Tottenham midfield at home to Burnley. I've got Saka against Newcastle. Then I have Richarlison and Gordon in their double game week. And I think if I didn't have a free hit, I would absolutely be fine with playing my team as I have it. However, because I've got my free hit and because my team looks absolutely fine going into the final day of the season, I think I'm going to play it this week. I'm not 100%. I'm about 95% sure that I'm going to play it this week. There is a small chance that I just look at that team that I've got at the moment and think bringing in Cornet and Maddison is not worth it for Kulusevski.
I was going to say, surely a big part of you judging by how that team sounds. And like, for context, my team's really similar. You know, double Liverpool defense against Southampton, the Spurs guys against Burnley, the City double defense against West Ham away. Although that game's probably got a bit more meaning now. When you look at that, look at all the singles who have got decent players, decent matchups, and you must be thinking, oh, I could just go into game week 38 and do stuff like, I don't know, buying Mane instead of Salah, and just doing all these little things to move things around and have a really sort of differential team in 38. If your team is that good this week and the players you're dropping as well, like if you talk us through this free hit team that you've sent me, like there's a loads of sort of gaps and loads of players who have been missed out here in favour of those who do happen to just have 2 games.
Yeah, so the free hit draft that we've got here for listeners is Pickford in goal with Mykolenko in defence with Cash and Dean. So double Everton and double Villa defence. We've got Salah, Son, Zaha, Cornet, Maddison, Richarlison and Watkins. Of course, Maddison completely dependent of whether he's going to be available for that double. Now, whether he's available for the double or not is worth talking about. I'm not sure that I really will end up with him, given the double is difficult, including Chelsea away. And then, is he going to start both, even if he is coming back into the side? I've then got Cornet in there. I've then got Zaha in there in my midfield as well, instead of, replacing the likes of Kulusevski. I think the big one for me of why it's active is Aston Villa, and how good their double is the key area that I'm missing when I look at my team. And I have no real way of getting them in apart from, if I start taking a -4, for example. -4 is possible that I take this week, although the only issue with that is I would have made completely different transfers last week if I was not planning on free hitting this week. It is really difficult, and I feel like I'm just going round in circles talking about this free hit team, but it's only got 2 single game week players in here in Salah and Son. You're grimacing at the look of it with sort of Cornet, Maddison in there, as well as double Everton and double Aston Villa defense. But I think Cash and Dean are really good options this week, as is Pickford, as is Zaha, as is Watkins. And it's the only way that I can get all of these players. And I could maybe buy 2 of them for a -4, but without that, I'm so far away. And given that 70% of the top 10K or 65% of the top 10K still have their free hit left to play, the majority of them will be building a team that looks maybe not quite as extreme to a double game week like this, but a lot of people will be going with a team that looks like this. Do you think I'm completely crazy playing my free hit this week?
No, I think when you hedge it in those terms, and if you plan for it, and this has been your plan, then it makes a lot of sense. I just kind of you look at it and you think, all right, a Liverpool clean sheet, you're going to be quite exposed to that to some extent, aren't you? Like going to a game without Trent, but then you've got the extra fixture for those other players, and that kind of negates that. The majority of this basically is the apex of double game weeks for teams that we don't really like that much versus single game weeks for teams that we do really like and want those sort of individuals in. I think, as we said a few times, like, you've only got a certain amount of chances left to bite at that cherry. So it makes a lot of sense to do these things. To be honest, my main sort of sources of grimacing here are Maxwell Cornet and James Maddison. I think those are the 2 that I look at and just think, oh, I mean, surely you can do better. Like, you maybe get even with those 2, I'd be looking at maybe just getting a Liverpool defender in for one of them, and then potentially looking elsewhere for the other player as well. Finding a different individual, because I just think Leicester a shot, and I just don't really think I just feel like Burnley have come off the wall really now under Mike Jackson's leadership, and now it's just a time for them to look at the man in the mirror and think, am I really going to stay up here? I'm not sure they are. I don't think they're at that period. I can understand why you got Cornet, but yeah. But the rest of the team, absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. I can't argue against Villa. I can't argue against having Richarlison as your captain. I can't argue against Wilfried Zaha, who I'm looking at. I can't argue against keeping Salah and Son. And given where you are and the considerations you're making, obviously you can say my base team is good, but this team has more fixtures, and that makes sense.
Yeah, and actually, if I look at the whole season, and if I knew the season was going to be, if we got game week 1 and we planned out where these were the doubles, these were the blanks, and they were going to look like this, I don't think this is a good week in the grand scheme of things to have used my second free hit. I think previous game weeks, if I had a free hit in game week 30, for example, and not, had to plan for it, I would have probably been better off for it. And, I don't think there's that much upside. I think there's a lot of risk for it. Cornet and Maddison were the last two names on there, and are definitely two names that could make way. I did have before, I think, Robertson in for Mikalenko and then Gordon in for Cornet, for example.
Yeah.
Something like that really does help with the risk a little bit. But then there's a lot less changes to what my team looks like currently, because I've already got Robertson, I've already got Trent, I've already got Gordon in. So then maybe I'm thinking I'm changing it for the sake of changing it. But
yeah, maybe.
To go back to Joe's question of which single game weekers would I want to prioritize, I think Son, whether you're on a free hit or not, Son is absolutely got to be in there. Salah or another element of that Liverpool attack. Now, if you do want to take a bit of a gamble, not go Salah and go for the likes of Diaz or Jota, depending who doesn't start in the FA Cup, because of course the game week 37 deadline falls on Sunday after the FA Cup final. So we will know that Liverpool lineup. But I do think you want to invest in Liverpool for at least one asset, because Southampton, we've spoken about on the beach for the past couple of weeks. And I think if there is one team who looks like they are on the beach, that is Southampton at the moment. They don't look like they want to score or keep a clean sheet for no love nor money. So I definitely think Son as a minimum from Spurs, and Salah or another Liverpool attacker at a minimum. And then the other ones that we've got, I would have said Chelsea about 2 weeks ago if we were having this conversation, but given the way we're performing at the moment, I think you'd probably go for the doubler over a Chelsea asset. Whereas the way you've got Liverpool performing and Man City performing, there's the debate there. Man City is the other one. Away to West Ham, to me, is the hardest fixture they have left between now and the end of the season, because West Ham have been knocked out of Europe. They'll have a full week of rest to go into that game. In theory, if they want to get into Europe next season, they'll have to win every game that they have left this season, which includes picking up points against Manchester City. So they're going to have to put out a big performance if they want to win away at West Ham. I think they probably will, but I do think that's maybe a difficult fixture, but it's also the fixture that they'll have to bring out their best performances in. So you could go for the likes of Mahrez, Foden, De Bruyne, Jesus are all good picks in there as well. I wouldn't say that they're essential. I think you can probably get away with them, but then you can look at the defensive options as well. If you go with no City defense like I've got, you do run a big risk of things going horribly wrong for you. However, if I had to predict, I would think West Ham would get something in that game, given that they have a full week's rest to go into it, given that Manchester City have full backline of injuries. They're going to start Ake at left centre-back, Zinchenko at left-back to go with it, or Fernandinho. Just think there's a chance that West Ham score in that one. So on a free hit, I think that's one of the fights I'm going to pick, that having no Man City defense, and hope that West Ham score there. But Son, Spurs attack, and Salah or Liverpool attack is the two places that I think are still essential, even if you're on a free hit.
Yeah, but do remember that City's SGC is still outrageous, really. Outrageously low, that is. So it's probably worth kind of mentioning. But yes, I can see what you mean. And I'm sure all Liverpool fans will be behind you there, Harry, in terms of hoping that West Ham do pull something off against Man City. Leicester, I mean, just to mention quickly, I don't think we'll spend much time on them, but they're second from bottom in terms of expected goals per open play over the last 6 game weeks. I mean, they're not very far off Southampton, who are bottom, and Watford have got a better open play expected goals than Leicester over the last 6 game weeks. I think probably just says it all really about them and what's going on with their season at the moment. Everton, though, I'm a little bit more kind of obviously a bit warmer to them. Looks like Tory Frank has pulled them out of the mess that he put them in. But I mean, Richarlison this week doesn't like the standout captain, doesn't he, really? With the 2 home games. And generally, I think that it looks like they're going to have enough about them to pull themselves out of danger. But 2 home games, improving expected goals per open play. It's looking a little bit better at the moment in mid-table, whereas kind of throughout the course of the season, they've been kind of frequenting the bottom 4. It's not quite a Lampard revolution, but I think it's good enough at the moment to kind of be thinking at least for Richarlison, if you're not free hitting, could be probably the one that you'd be thinking of bringing in. I think his effective ownership, if you do care about such things, is going to be through the roof, isn't it?
Yeah, I do like Richarlison. They've been better at home, particularly as well. So I think those 2 fixtures, though Palace and Brentford have both been picking up quite a lot of points recently and looking pretty good, I would expect Everton to go into those games and get some results. They do look safe ish now, particularly with that win against Leicester. You'd be surprised if they don't pick up any points against Watford, Brentford, or Crystal Palace. And I think one win now would put them far enough away from particularly Leeds, who I don't see picking up enough points to catch Everton between now and the end of the season. I do think Leeds, on a side note, are in a bit of bother, given they played Brighton and Brentford in their last two teams who have seemed to have found a little bit of end of season form. But yeah, I really like Everton. In goal, Pickford, I think, is the number one option to go with on a free hit. Two nice home fixtures. You could go Martinez, but the defensive options at Villa are better than the defensive options at Everton, which means I think Pickford save points. I think he got 2 save points, made 6 saves at the weekend, would be the one that I would go with. In defense, Mikalenko, if he's fit, I wouldn't expect him to score goals like that every week, but I do think he's probably the one that I would go with. Maybe Coleman in there, but I'm not sure Coleman, again, with the amount of minutes that they are going to have to play between now and the end of the season, would cause me a little bit of worry. Holgate seems to be starting if you need a cheap option, sort of 4.2, especially with Mina's injury. Looks like he'll be starting for the foreseeable future. The midfield up front is pretty much Richarlison or bust, because it doesn't look like Calvert-Lewin's going to get on the pitch for a consistent amount of minutes anytime soon. Midfield is probably Gordon, although he's not looked as good recently, I think, as he did previously. But the Damari Gray is more expensive, and there's no real reason to go with him over Gordon, for example, unless you want a real differential. So I like Everton. I think you can invest in them pretty much all over the pitch. It is a good double. They are playing two teams who are playing quite well at the moment, but I would still back Everton to get something in there. One on my free hit that you slated a little bit is Cornet, and Burnley are an interesting one. The fight for that last relegation spot between Leeds and Burnley, I feel like will go down to the last day of the season when Leeds are away at Brentford and Burnley have Newcastle at home. But I do think it's possible that Burnley do need or can get something out of these 2 away games in 37. With injuries that they've got now in the back line, with like me and Tarkowski looking injured as well for this, they're going to have to find some goals from somewhere, because they're not going to win these games by shutting out the opposition. And with, again, Weghorst not looking at it, with Rodriguez flagged, with the other amount of flags they've got, Vidra as well, playing with injury for the past couple of games, a lot of that goal responsibility will fall to Cornet, which is why he's the one that I went with. I wouldn't go with any of the others, but he is the one out of all of them that knows where the back of the net is. It is a very big punt, and it's only a punt that I would ever take with 2 game weeks left on a free hit in game week 37. I don't love it that much, but I just think that they're going to have to find some goals from somewhere if they want to pick up anything between now and the end of the season. Okay. And I feel like it's going to have to come from him.
Or Dwight McNeil, who knows?
It's true. It will come from someone completely random.
Been reinvigorated under Mike Jackson, and who wouldn't want to be risen from the dead? Elsewhere, I mean, there's a few teams there that maybe we're not going to mention too much about. Villa back to their winning ways, and I'm looking, for example, at bringing in maybe, because spoilers, I'm looking at get rid of Ramsdale. He's annoyed me too much recently. So I might even do my 7th goalkeeper transfer of the season and bring in Emma Martinez, just because I think that the defensive effective ownership of Villa is going to skyrocket this game week. And my bet noir, Luca Dean, back from the dead. And also, the sort of player recently, the numbers he's been putting down, I was looking at in prep for the pod, like he's gotten to kind of the levels wherein if he does get any sort of return, if they do keep a clean sheet, he's right in it for the bonus, because his baseline bonus is so high at the moment, and how narrow Villa seems to be playing. Maybe that was just a tactic against Burnley, but how narrow they were playing seems to focus a lot of the attention on both those fullbacks. So I completely understand that. I know you've got Watkins, who we're not going to spend too much time talking about the talent in this one, but Coutinho, a notable emission here. And Rohan at What's in the Handle asked about Coutinho, because he's got Coutinho, Harry, and he's looking to move him to Zaha. So move one double game weeker to another. I mean, Coutinho's a mission. Obviously, you've got the double defense and Watkins, so it kind of makes sense. But if you've got Coutinho, or you're eyeing up Coutinho, like, what would your thoughts be on that man?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. He's looked okay when he first came in. He looked pretty good, and then he faded out a little bit. And I think a lot of Villa fans have wanted Buendia in particular to get a bit of a start in the team, and he took it with both hands in the first part of game week 36 with a goal and an assist. He looked really good. It feels a very sideways move to go from one double game week player to another. If you don't have anything else to do with your team, then fine, because I don't think that we're going to get 2 starts from Coutinho in the double. I am guessing here, but given the way that they performed this week, I can't see Buendia, missing out completely over the double. Ings has looked good. Watkins has looked good as well. I do find it difficult to think that he's going to get 2 starts in that double game week. It does feel very sideways though, because even in one of those games, we know in theory what he's capable of doing. But if the rest of your team's nice and that's the one player you want in Zaha and the only player you're willing to sell is Coutinho, I don't have a problem with that at all, because I would, my free hit team, I've got Zaha in here. He's got the vice captaincy at the moment. And this Coutinho is nowhere near getting into my free hit team. I'd rather have Cornet or Madison in there over having Coutinho. So I know that is quite a statement, but yeah,
to that extent. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but I don't think that the sort of starts are going to be there for him over the double. I don't think you can rely on it enough. It's a very luxury transfer. I think most people who've got Coutinho will play him, hope he gets a sub appearance in one and starts the other, which is fine. I think he's capable of doing something with that amount of minutes anyway. But if your team is great or you're on a free hit, then I wouldn't particularly be happy with Coutinho going into this game week.
Makes a lot of sense. Did you know, Harry, that I was surprised by this when I looked it up? Zaha's 13 goals this year is his highest total ever in terms of goal scoring since he's been on FPL. And he's actually only 14 points off this being his best season ever in FPL, 135 points at the moment. Yeah, one of those that has just completely gone under the radar throughout the course of the season. But no, I completely understand what you're saying. And what's really interesting about Palace is, well, a lot of things interesting about Palace, and obviously, you can argue motivation's not there, etc., etc. I know they both their games coming up are away, but the non-pen XG for the last 6 home and last 6 away games has been pretty much the same, 5.8 on both sides. So it just suggests that they'll be okay, I think, for these games. I just wonder, take for example, you've got Zaha in your free hit team, right? And you've also got double Everton defense and double Villa defense, and Zaha plays Villa and Everton. I mean, that's kind of what makes me wonder about including a double Villa and double Everton defense, and the people who are doing that. Like, surely you got to back one side or the other.
Yeah, I think so. I think with Cash and Dean, there's enough attacking output there to go with them, and then hope they get something against Burnley, and then the attacking output they're capable of getting. I think double Everton defense is great while I'm looking at it now, but it's close to the deadline. I think that's likely to fade and Gordon will come in. I do like Pickford for his saves in particular and the bonus points that he's capable of. But this is the issue with free hits this week. And I get a lot of comments on YouTube or on streams. They say, but Harry, look at your team. You've got so many of your players playing against each other. A lot of your attackers playing against the defenders that you've got in here. I had one free hit which had a Palace defender in there, but in my starting lineup I've got Richarlison and Watkins, so I've got one less fire against each other than I had before. But with the amount of teams that we are looking to target in the double, in Villa, in Everton, because they play against Crystal Palace and Burnley, and 2 teams that we're also looking to target, it's another thing that is slightly putting me off the free hit, because I'm like, well, what's the maximum that Zaha's going to get? Well, if he gets a goal in both games, well, then what's the maximum that my defense is going to get? So it does another thing that just makes me worry about whether this free hit is a good idea or not, or whether I should revert back to how it looked before with Cancelo in there, with Trent in there, with Robertson, James, Alonso, these guys who are very capable of scoring as much, and maybe just add 1 or 2. So I could add, Cash in there and Watkins in there for a -4 and be done with it and play my free hit in the final week of the season.
Well, maybe not Alonso, by the sounds of it, but
well,
maybe everyone else. Yes. No, I completely understand that. I mean, your team that you sent me is absolutely like the base one is pretty stacked, but I appreciate how you're kind of saying, yeah, well, I've only got Richarlison and Schmeichel as a double game week, so I might as well go for it. Maybe worth looking at a 38 double team and thinking, yeah, okay, sorry, a 38 free hit team and thinking, well, how would that look and where would I go? Maybe that's an answer you can only give yourself next week, but I mean, I wouldn't doubt yourself too much about your strategy, because the team that you've got could massively pay off. And as you said, betting against the likes of the Chelsea defence, betting against the likes of the City defence makes a lot of sense to me. So I even though you're going to have sort of occasional sort of hedging on both sides, equally, I don't think that worries me too much. It's just something like, with Maddison, maybe I'd bin him off for Robertson. So at least if there's a Liverpool clean sheet, you're not massively exposed to it. You've got a little bit of a stake in that because, as you said, Southampton is so on the beach that they're buried in the sand, aren't they? You've got a sandcastle on their faces right now. Anything else to say about this double coming up? Because I'm not sure there is there?
No, I think the only thing to add is potentially who these teams play on the final day of the season, and that impacts potentially who you want to go and buy with them because, Villa have got City away on the final day. So this is particularly important for people who are not playing their free hit. So Villa away to City. So if you go heavy in on your Villa assets, then you've got a very difficult fixture to field them in. Palace have got Manchester United at home. So actually I quite like Zaha for that. I think given that Manchester United just conceded 4 to Brighton, I think Zaha is probably for non-free hitters. The
Old
one
club
that I would
as well.
like. Exactly. Zaha is probably the one that I'd like to buy the most because actually the 3 games, 37 and 38, is probably where I'd expect to get most of the points. And then Everton away at Arsenal on the final day, a team who'll be, trying to push for Champions League places is, again, a difficult one. So particularly Everton and Villa, I would just be conscious if you're not free hitting quite how heavily you go investing in them and look at what your team will look like for the final day. Because if it means that you're having to field, double Aston Villa because you've bought so heavily into the doubles in 37, then is it as worth it? You need to look at it as a sort of combination of the two if you're not playing on free hit because of some of those games on the final day of the season.
Cool. No, it will come back to kind of how we're setting up and kind of just to round this point off in just a minute. But I think we had a few questions in about it this week, so I think it's probably just worth addressing a little bit about next year, just because obviously it's quite pertinent. Hopefully by the time you guys listen to this, it won't be the fact that Mr. Erling Haaland has decided to join Real Madrid. It looks like from all sources out there, he's going to be joining Man City. So it might be worth talking about next year and how that looks a tiny bit here. I think we'll probably come back to it in the final pod that you're on, Harry, just to talk about that a bit more. Abid asked, when do the prices get revealed for next season? Which I think is probably probably one of the key points for some people. But it tends to be like on the week before it launches. They do a drip feed around then, as I'm sure most of you listening will know. But probably the best question we got this week, admittedly slightly tongue-in-cheek, was from Adam at 352. How are we going to fit in Haaland, Son, Kane, Salah, and Nketiah into our teams next season? But I think, Haaland is the biggie, isn't he, really? I mean, he'll be one of those paradigm shifts. I saw, Andrew Ferguson saying, he's a fantasy game changer, things like that on Twitter, and quite a lot of excitement about that today, which is completely understandable given kind of his profile. A bit of a monster, 0.92 XGI per 90 this season, second behind Lewandowski, 1.04. Admittedly, he's missed a few games. And last season, 0.97, again behind Lewandowski, 1.04. Again, what a consistent monster. But obviously, young and better ammo, I guess, than the Dortmund team. 20 starts this season. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those, isn't it, Harry, which could really shape the foundations of FPL. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing him in England. Perhaps you're probably not as excited about seeing him play for Man City. But what are your views on this? I mean, obviously, we're a long way out. It may not happen, but, it's worth speculating about, isn't it, for a bit?
Yeah, it is. And I think City become even more of that dominant team that they are now. The one thing they've missed, they've done very well with trying to find sort of ways to sort of plug that gap that they have up front, but they don't have one player in their team really, maybe Mahrez, who has that real killer instinct in front of goal to win them games at the death that I think Haaland will be able to bring. People are predicting that, De Bruyne, Haaland become the sort of new Kane, Son, or the new Ryan Fraser, Callum Wilson, that I think is a more better way of comparing them. But I do think it proves that some of the assets that they've got around them, particularly De Bruyne. However, Foden particularly being very appealing because he's playing that false 9 role. If he's not playing that, he might get a price rise based off his points that he scored this season. But if he's not playing that central role, is it as beneficial for him? Does it squeeze the amount of those wingers that they've now got because they've got one less spot to play them through? So there's no Jesus through the middle anymore. So he would have to rotate with Mahrez on the right-hand side, for example, Foden and Grealish both on the left-hand side. I do think it may narrow down and even increase Pep roulette to some extent. Pep often takes his time to embed players in, but I'm not so sure I see that being the case with Haaland. I think it would be great for De Bruyne. I think it will be great for Haaland as options, but I do think it will mean the pool of Manchester City attackers that we're able to pick from is less unless some of them go leaving in the summer.
I mean, I'm with you on De Bruyne actually. I just think about the amount of assists that he could possibly get. I mean, he's been feeding loads of players their dinner, and they've not been able to finish it for quite a while, as you've kind of mentioned. And the bonus as well for De Bruyne, like obviously even now, if he gets one assist, he's kind of well on his way in the BPS to get in there. And this season, actually, he's actually level with Trent for bonus points per 90 among players who have played 1,500 minutes or more. I do think that De Bruyne's price was a bit mad this year. Remember, he got the 12 million off last year, only getting 150. I think they've been got there, I think, up 140 points. So he got a price rise out of nothing really this year. Annoyingly, I think that probably means that he's going to stay prohibitively priced. We're not going to see kind of 9.5 million De Bruyne like we saw back in 2019-20. But I think you're right. Like the ensemble around him is going to be really interesting. Around them, I say, Haaland and De Bruyne, and maybe we'll see Jack Grealish get his feet under the table a bit better. They always said that Mahrez was bad the first season, and some commentators say that Grealish is probably never going to make it there, but who knows? I see Foden as well make his way into the centre midfield berth. We all kind of thought that he would eventually be kind of playing the David Silva role, and I think it'll be really interesting with Haaland joining. Oddly, Harry, though, the thing that kind of got what this got me thinking about more and more wasn't really Man City. It was actually United. And I was thinking about kind of how next year's going to look. We're always on the lookout for value, aren't we? And always on the lookout for weird sort of situations. I remember, when Spurs weren't in the Champions League and weren't in Europe, and they were really nicely priced. Remember the year when Hazard was a really nice price for Chelsea. But United, I'm really fascinated to see what they'll do there, because obviously this season is descending into a train wreck squared, and there's no way Bruno can be 12. There's no way Ronaldo can be 12.5. Sancho this year was 9.0. He's not even broken the 100 mark yet. Defense has been a bit of a joke. 5.5 for Maguire and so on and so forth. But there's been huge bargains to be had there, surely, over the course of next year, especially with the new manager, if he does manage to not screw it up at the biggest club.
Yeah, Manchester United, particularly Fernandes and Ronaldo, are interesting ones. And then if Rashford stays as well, Rashford and Sancho, what happens with those? Ronaldo, although he's not at the same level as some of the others, but he's still the third highest goal scorer in the league with 18 goals. And, he missed the first 5 game weeks of the season. If he played those, he could be up there playing, competing for the Golden Boot with the likes of Salah and Son. So I think he'll be 11.5 at a sort of minimum 11.5, probably, maybe even 12, because, the hype around a player does have a little bit of an impact on their price. Fernandes will probably be similar, maybe 0.5 less, maybe 11. The two that then really come into the conversation when you talk about that around that price, for me, is Son. And then the other one is Mane that goes with him. Son and Kane have constantly been priced. Son is cheaper and Kane is more expensive. I would absolutely love them next year to make them exactly the same price. I think they score points at the same level. I don't see Son needing to be more expensive, because I think there's a lot of, point scoring that Son has done that maybe is not that sustainable, or that he's one of the best finishers in Europe and he's even outperforming that at the moment. But Son versus Kane, I would love to see them both priced at, 12 million on the nose, for example. And then Sadio Mane, I know his point scoring is there over the past few weeks, but I hope that they price the gap between him and Salah enough to make that a debate for the first time. I think
100%, 100%. Especially what could be really interesting. Let's take those 2 points separately. One, I would wonder if, and I know that there's obviously discussions about how they actually play in terms of their position on the pitch, but in terms of a pure game sense, I wonder if Son is one of those who ends up being pushed into the striker slot I really do. I wouldn't be surprised if they do that. They've got to do something to sort of begin to make a difference in that slot. And if they're both 12 million, both strikers, I think that could be fascinating with Kane and Son there. And same with Mane as well. I mean, obviously, I don't think it will happen with Mane, but he has been playing centrally a lot recently. I don't know if that's going to stick, to be honest. I've got no idea whether it will. But I kind of wonder whether he could be a candidate again to push forward. But you're right as well. This season, the pricing of Mane and Salah made Mane completely irrelevant for the whole season, effectively, apart from, your free hits or your 1 week punts. That was the only time you were ever going to be considering Mane because of how damn good Salah is. And I think that, again, is going to be really, really interesting.
Go
ahead.
Sorry, the other half of it, going completely to the opposite end of the pitch, is what happens with these premium defenders that we've got. We constantly start the season thinking, yeah, okay, we'll go 3 at the back. And by the end of it, we think, well, there's so much value here. We can still squeeze them all in. Cancelo starting the season at 6 million now looks absolutely like crazy pricing. James, starting at the prices that they've seen, Robertson. Next season, those City defenders, I think Diaz and Laporte will both be 6.5 at a minimum, despite being centre backs. We'll see Cancelo go up to 7.5, probably. James, Alonso unlikely to be at Chelsea next season by the looks of things, but James will be up at 7.5 million, along with or maybe 7, slightly cheaper. But Robertson, Trent will all be there as well. That we found value in defence in these premium teams this season, last season as well. I worry that they're just going to continue to be squeezed next season, that we're going to have to look for some of these cheaper ones. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the likes of the Spurs defence, with those wing backs, how far up they go, how far up do the potential Arsenal defence go, what price is Tierney next season, what price is Tomiyasu? Are we going to be completely, priced out of, are they going to go 5.5 for some of these guys? And then it is much more difficult, especially with the lack of attacking threat that they've got. But defense, I think, is interesting because we've had such a heavy defense this season that they are all going to have a reasonable price. I was going to say a massive price increase. There's a limit to how far some of them can go, but a reasonable price increase on what they were this season, which I think has the ability to really change the way we play the game next year compared to how we've played it, particularly in the second half of this season with our team structures.
Potentially, I mean, we've seen this discussion crop up a few times in the past. Will defenders be stupid high? I don't think so. I would be very, very, very surprised. I mean, obviously, we don't know what the chip's going to be and what they're going to do, etc., etc. I'd be very surprised if they started to kind of start pricing defenders at 8.5, 9, something like that, and going mental. I think it will probably be 7.5 again, which will be the apex. Would not be shocked to see Cancelo and Trent being the same price, for example. Would not be surprised to see Robertson being just below Trent or something like that. Obviously, Robertson's outperformed Trent over the back stretch of this season. James, I don't know again whether he's done enough to merit a massive price. Really, a 6.5 maybe would be for him, just because of the fitness, frankly. But I think it's definitely interesting to see how it's all going to show up. And you've got the players that leave sort of consideration. If Gabriel, if Tomiyasu is sat at 5.5, then maybe you'll look at next season. I know it sounds a bit crazy, but Luke Shaw, maybe if he's at 5 million, then United have got nothing to focus on except the league. Could be really interesting if he's reinvigorated under ETH. I mean, you always find ways to fill the gap. And one that I was thinking about was Leicester, actually. No European competition. It would all be about the league for them. And you've got interesting characters there, like James Justin in defence, for example, and Maddison and Barnes that we've spoken about as well in midfield. But there's always going to be people who fill the gaps. And I think, as with every year, it's going to be very interesting to see how it all sort of slots together and how it all works out once we see the prices. And the key, I think, more than anything, and people are kind of penciling in having Haaland, Salah, try to shove in Son or something like that. But the key is always going to be, and I think next year, acutely so, trying to figure out what B team player, as it were, best backs up the talisman premium, if that makes sense. So is a Luis Diaz going to be worth owning over Salah to enable you to have Haaland and Kane. I mean, that's the sort of, hopefully, the sort of decision we're going to have to make when it comes to the pricing. And I think that that's going to be really, really fascinating, to be honest. I'll tell you what I'd love most, though, is if players become viable, more players become viable than we've seen. So there's so many players that aren't of interest or never of interest. We're all fishing in the same ponds. I think it'd be really cool to have different options out there. There's one thing I do know, Harry. I'm not going to buy Mitrovic. I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt again.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Just like everyone else in the community saying they've been there and they've bought the t-shirt.
I'm going to buy Dom Solanke. I'm all about Solanke.
My front, again, we'll have no forwards to pick. So we'll have a front line of Mitrovic, Solanke, and 8 million Nketiah if he gets priced ridiculously high or whatever Nketiah goes up to next season, just leading the line for Arsenal and they don't sign anyone else. But yeah, Mitrovic, however many goals he's scored now, 45, 49 goals in the Championship. That Fulham team are capable of doing things like Wolves did in the Premier League. That is the best Championship team that they have seen, that league has seen in a while. That might be a bold statement, but they've scored 110 goals or something now. Crazy amount of goals in the Championship. I think they might do something with Mitrovic to even try and include that as well. I think he'll be slightly more, maybe 7 million, one of the most expensive newly promoted strikers that we've seen in the game. As a result, it's a slightly new system compared to how we've seen Fulham in the past. Yeah. And I think he could still come back with a vengeance to try and prove us all wrong. I know how much he takes into account the nasty tweets that those FPL managers put up about him when he does blank. But I like him as an option. Dom Solanke is another one. I think there'll be some of those newly promoted teams which will have some of those budget ones. You spoke about, the Diaz compared to the Salah, but it's just as much. Who's that 5.5 million midfielder going to be that's going to help us squeeze it in and around the rest of the team? Who's that 4.5 million defender going to be that we're going to be able to do? And actually, the biggest question that I want to answer is who's the 4.5 million goalkeeper that we're all going to end up with, like we did with Sanchez, like we did with Ramsdale, like we did with Pope, like we did with Martinez. There will be one that we all end up with come game week 1. And I'm just interested to find out who it's going to be, whether it's a newly promoted one, whether Gaeta stays at that price, whether Butland's first choice at Palace. That Palace defense looked pretty good for the second half of the season. So yeah, it's those cheap options that I enjoy looking at just as much as the premium ones to go with it.
Well, I'll say Phil Billing, right? He's now playing a progressive number 8 role under Scott Parker. 8 goals and 10 assists this year in the Championship. 4.5 million. Hey, who knows? That's my guess anyway. Anyway, I suppose we'll come back to this a little bit more detail at some point in the future, with or without Harry. Who knows? Hopefully we'll do it again. I think it's worth just curtailing it there, to be honest, because we don't know. We've got no idea what the hell we're talking about, but it's worth talking about anyway, just because of the fact that everybody is on about pricing with Haaland, who I believe will probably be, I think will be given the premium price tag, that's for sure. Right. Transfers and captains, and Harry, I mean, you've mentioned you're on the free hit. Can you just describe what the key sort of conundrums are for you at the moment? I think you've obviously spoken about how your team's looking, everything like that. What are the key conundrums for you, and where's the armband going to go? Is it locked on Richarlison?
It's between Richarlison, Watkins and Zaha, I think, the three that I'd go with. If like Ings doesn't start against Liverpool tomorrow night, then I think there's a good chance that Ings actually comes in for Watkins. Because if I had Ings starting both those games versus Watkins starting both of those games, I think it's just as easy that Ings gets as many points as Watkins. He's likely to be on penalties as well if he's on the pitch. So I don't think Ings' legs has the ability to play 5 games in 3 game weeks. But if he doesn't start Liverpool because they want the running of Watkins, for example, and they don't need Ings in that game, then I may well end up with Ings in there. And if Ings is going to start both of them, maybe becomes a stronger captaincy than Ollie, I can't hit a barn door, Watkins, although he seems to be finding the back of the net a bit recently. I'm just a little bit concerned the more we talk about it, about whether this is the right week for me to free hit, because Cornet and Maddison over double Liverpool defense does just look crazy and crazier the more I look at it. Even if I moved it on to Gordon and someone, I'm getting too close to my starting team for a -4 that I could potentially get to. It might come down to what do I expect my team to look like for the final game week of the season. If Alonso isn't going to come back into that Chelsea lineup, that's another flag I'm going to have for the final week of the season. I don't have a forward that I'm happy to play. I was going to use one free transfer there. So I may wait for the Chelsea lineup on Thursday to see what Tuchel says, to see whether he's got any chance of coming back in. And I'll play around with free hits to try and see how much upside I can get. But I'll either be playing my free hit or probably a -4 to cover Villa defense and Villa attack as well.
Oh, interesting. I mean, my team's pretty stacked, and that's the thing. I've got Ramsdale in goal away at Newcastle. We just got tonked 5-0 by City. I've got all my defenses away. So Ramsdale away at Newcastle, double City defense away at West Ham, Cancelo and Laporte there, and Robertson and Trent. I mean, all four of those players start. I think. Midfield, I've got Gordon, who's a doubler, Salah and Saka both away. Salah at Southampton and Saka away at Newcastle, and Kulusevski at home to Burnley. Up front, I've got Kane at home to Burnley, and I've got Richarlison with the armband firmly, I think, on him at the moment. Brentford and Crystal Palace. And I'm considering a couple of things. I'm considering maybe removing Ramsdale because we've been very bad at conceding shots on target recently. I don't know what's happened, but it just feels like it's not really working at the back thus far. During the Leeds game, I was saying on my Slack a lot, we're going to concede. But if there's a corner or a set piece, we'll concede it. And we did. And I think we've kind of hit that moment like Man City do at times. Not that our defence anywhere near comparable to Man City, but not we do at times. Or we just have a horrible tendency of conceding that one big chance. So I'm wondering whether I buy Martinez to cover that massive explosion in Villa defence ownership for Ramsdale, or I get in Pickford, who's been getting the saves recently, but yikes, that's Trevor Everton. I'm not sure about that. So I could leave that, and I could just do the plan, which was to do Zaha for Saka. Now, we've not really mentioned Arsenal at all here throughout this entire pod, actually, because obviously we've still got loads to play for. So much of it hinges on this week. And you said a minute ago, I'm going to wait until blah, blah, blah happens over the course of this week. And obviously so much of it hinges on this week. But Saka is a bit gas to me. And I'm only going to be looking at being without him for the final 2 game weeks. So I'll basically be gaining 1 extra game. And if I bought in Zaha, plus the Man United game on game week 38 is quite a good game for Zaha, really. So that could be what I do. I think I'm going to try to avoid the hit if I can, unless I can find a way to feel better about removing the goalkeeper, perhaps. But yeah, I think for me, the armband's on Richarlison, and you said Richarlison as well for you, right?
Yeah, at the moment, him or Ings, if Ings is going to start both.
Oh, Dings would be huge, wouldn't it? I've still got massive PTSD about Danny Ings' goals. I didn't really own him for a lot of his periods of when he was really in his purple patch, and I in my mind's eye, whenever he scores, I can just see one of our friends, Chris on our Slack, just writing "Dings" in massive letters, and it was always like a proper face palm moment for me. But there you go. That could be a really nice captain. It's a really nice kind of example of the way you can just kind of flit and you can kind of just go with a slight zag in situations like that. And I like that, especially if he doesn't play. But for me, I think it's probably going to be a Richarlison, but there's definitely an argument, isn't there, for a Salah captaincy or a Kane captaincy against Burnley as an explosive asset. Cool. I think that is everything for the anti-penultimate time. I love saying that word this season.
I had to look it up. I'm not going to lie. You put it in a group chat and I was like, does that just mean penultimate? And I was like, hang on, no, it doesn't, because we've got 3 left. Then I worked it out. But anyway, yes, first thoughts. Again, I'm more and more erring on the side of caution and not playing my free hit this week, the more you talk me out of it. But let's hope that the second half of double game week 36 goes than the first half has. Thank you all for listening. We were Who Got the Assist.
Yeah, thanks very much, everybody. We'll be back next week previewing game week 38, talking about how many goals have been scored on the last day and how risky we should be as we try for one last stab at glory. Have a great rest of double game week 37, or indeed, if you listen to this later on in the week, have a great weekend, have a great life if you listen to this in 2 weeks' time. But anyway, in the meantime, I hope to see you and speak to you very, very soon. Goodbye.